Hi, folks. I'm Ryan Pacchini. I'm the head of channels and go-to-market strategy here at dotCMS. I'm thrilled that you've taken time out of your day to join dotConnect. We have an amazing session today. We're going to talk about implementation best practices and success stories, and we're joined by three great speakers. We have Lauren Wishna from Dragon Army with us. We have Michael Pereira from Solvisse with us, and Ian Cooper, who many of you may have interacted with at some point at dotCMS. He's a veteran here. And so I'm going to give each of them a chance to introduce themselves. Lauren has been instrumental in leading a great Clips implementation and longstanding dotCMS partner. Michael has been the lead in World Travel Holdings at Solvisse and an excellent partner for us as well. And Ian has supported many client implementations and many partners along the way. So Lauren, maybe just a little bit about you, and then we'll go to Michael and Ian.
Sure. So I'm Lauren Wishna, VP of Client Services at Dragon Army. My role is to oversee all of our partnerships, and I work very closely with project managers who oversee the day-to-day delivery. My role is the relational aspect of it. Are we inspiring clients' happiness? Are we supporting them the best? And what can we be looking ahead? And I get the really great privilege of working with clients such as Great Clips who truly inspire my own happiness.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Michael, to you.
Yeah, my name is Michael Pereira, and I run a boutique software company down in South Florida. I'm a software engineer, been a software engineer for 20 years, so I love building, I love creating. And in the last few years, I've been involved with dotCMS heavily with a couple of customers. And I really enjoyed the ride, so that's why for me, it's actually a privilege to be part of this panel today.
Yeah, thanks for both of you for being with us. We're thankful you're here. Ian, over to you, please. Just a quick intro on your side.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. And really thrilled to be here. I head up our professional services and technical onboarding departments, which similarly to Lauren and Michael means we get to work with on a daily basis some amazing customers, helping some dreams come true. And I'm excited to dig a little bit into how we do that today alongside our great partners like Lauren and Michael.
Yeah, our hope for this session is that you learn a bit about implementation best practices. There's a few things that you can take to your projects. If you're a partner, if you're a client or a prospect, learn about how we think about implementations at dotCMS. It's setting up the beginning of the journey properly is really critical to make sure that you meet your business outcomes long term. And so we know the implementation is the beginning of the journey, but it's really important to think through it properly and understand the best practices. So Lauren, maybe I'll start with you. Great Clips is a really interesting organization, a great organization, and would love to hear how you ran the evaluation process at Great Clips, and at the end of the day, why you decided that dotCMS was the right platform for them.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So anytime a partner comes to us and says we want to re-platform, we're looking for a new CMS, what tool do you recommend? Our first response is, what are your goals? What do you need? What functionality do you need out of this? What is driving you crazy about your current CMS? And then from that, we have a really methodical, objective way of evaluating different platforms against a certain set of criteria. By asking these upfront questions, we get to choose the CMSs that we think might have the best chance of meeting the client's needs. So in the case of Great Clips, they had really three main priorities: capabilities and interoperability. Is it simple enough to integrate with third-party tools? Think data governance or location listing providers. Also, is that a simple enough admin? They have a relatively small client team and they need something that was simple to maintain and update themselves after we set them up for success. Security and maintenance was another priority. Can it properly and safely handle customer data? And then finally, value and price. Great Clips is a really big company. They're only growing, they're only opening up more salons, and there is a lot of traffic that comes to the site. So they needed a price point that was accessible. So we take these platforms, evaluate them, put them in some big fancy spreadsheet, weight the priorities. Obviously, the higher the priority, the more weight that it gets, and it spits out a numerical score. In the case of Great Clips, we also evaluated Concrete CMS and Storyblock, and dotCMS was the clear winner, and that is how we got you guys.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate that. One of the things we really pride ourselves on at dotCMS is, and you probably heard this language, universal CMS, is this ability to support multiple stakeholders and have a balanced approach from, because you talked about a bunch of things from ease of use, which you might traditionally think about it, maybe something like WordPress. Then you talked about security, and then you talked about an efficient price point. So all those things, we really pride ourselves in kind of having that balanced approach from the folks who need to use the tool on the day-to-day to the compliance folks, to the people who are building. So I guess it sounds like you had a very thorough process in terms of evaluating, and I love how you put it in the system and output a number. I would love to see that on the back end someday. But so once you won the project, or once you kind of decided on the CMS, what expectations did you set on day one with the client around ensuring that their implementation was successful? What are the things that you said to them on maybe the initial kickoff call that you wanted to drive home so everyone was on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, with tech, it's tech. It can always go not how you would expect. Keep in mind, this was not only a new CMS for Great Clips, but it was a new CMS for our developers. So we knew from day one there was going to be a learning curve. Knowing that, though, I think the question to ourselves is, well, how do we reduce the steepness of that learning curve? So with Great Clips, we were building two sites, the franchisee site for the current prospective franchisees, as well as their main B2C site. The franchisee site was a lot smaller in terms of scope, in terms of scale, in terms of request. So our plan was to start with that site. That way we could get our bearings, learn what is working well for us, learn what is not working well for us, and really set ourselves up for success in the main site. The other thing that worked really well for our teams is we set up regular recurring calls with the tech team at dotCMS. So from the start, we could gut check our code and how we're building, course correct from the start. And again, it really gave us a solid game plan going into the main site.
Yeah, that's great, Lauren. I like the, I mean, we've started many projects on like in almost a test environment where you didn't have that, where you were looking long term at what was going to go into the big site, but the corporate site, but the franchisee site, that level of collaboration on architectural and implementation best practices with our team is something we still pride ourselves on. And so I think that the communication between SaaS company and partner and client is something that has been really critical. But taking the learnings from a small site, the taxonomy, the content types, things, and then being able to deploy them at scale is something we've seen often. I think maybe Michael, we'll transition to you now quickly, because I think World Travel Holdings is a bit different than Great Clips. There's some commonality and some things that are very unique, but maybe just tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on at World Travel Holdings, and then the process you laid out with them in order for them to be successful when you initially engage with the client.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. It's actually funny that, I mean, this is not related to the question, but it's funny that Lauren mentioned about the steepness of the curve for developers to learn it at the beginning. We actually tackled that. Aside from what she said, we trained a model, like an AI model, for us to, on the documentation, for us to be able to respond questions quickly, for the developers to do it. And that was before dotCMS came out with that as a feature, which is very cool, by the way.
Yeah.
Love it. But yeah, going back to the project, this organization has two business models, but one of them is a home-based travel agent business model, and they have about 6,000 sites, like as a whole. That's huge. You can imagine the level of customization that each of them want, and also being a franchise business model, you have to maintain the brand stability, and you have to make sure that 80 to 90% of the site actually is the same, except for the custom parts. So that was a project. The project was threefold. We had to redesign the website, each of the websites. We had to re-platform them from an old Magnolia CMS to dotCMS, and also we had to create a custom software for some of the users to interact with the CMS, because it was a little complex for that user base, specific needs. In terms of the process, we are an agile shop, So the first thing we do is we establish the cadence of the meeting. We, in this case, the bi-weekly meetings, demo with stakeholders and capturing feedback. Feedback is the main goal there. And as a whole, we approach projects like this in phases. First, we do discovery sessions. From there, we got all that threefold structure. Then we do a lot more sessions on requirements refining, which will yield a requirements list and also a very strong initial backlog for us to work on. And then we go into development in 2-week sprints. And like creating, refactoring, delivering, creating the factory. And then at the end, we improve the documentation that we've been generating as part of it.
Yep.
In which we plan to include, by the way, a pod with Q&A for AI related to the project and dotCMS.
Yeah, we're gonna touch on the AI Q&A here in a sec. But Michael, it's 6,000 sites is a lot of sites, and to get to a place where you got 80-90% commonality across those sites is a challenge. I love how you are systematic in terms of understanding what the requirements are. I could feel from you that is so going to be so critical for you, and then creating a backlog of things that are important. But I can imagine in a project that there's sort of always someone who's wanting something that's more custom, even around the parameters that you built. And so my question for you, and Ian, I know that you've supported this as well, is who did you start with as a key set of stakeholders on the project, and who did you need to make sure was involved in order for you guys to be successful? Like what work did you do to make sure you had the right people in the room to do the requirements gathering and then have the right set of deliverables?
Yeah. Really good question. The main stakeholder, the main customer for us was the marketing department of WDH, and like the asset marketing department, they don't have very deep knowledge on the IT side, on the development side. So we also partner with their B2B IT department, few key stakeholders. Principal developer was involved all along the way. A director as well from the IT side, and then from the marketing side, from content creators to management. I made sure that I had them all in the same room and we're all talking the same language and iterating over the requirements as we went. And thanks to dotCMS and the flexibility that it gives you, and the approach to content reutilization, we could make those changes on the fly and iterate and get to a final product that was very satisfactory for them.
Yeah, Michael, I want to go to you in a second, but Michael, I think one of the themes I heard is you had a principal architect, you had a marketing leader, you had content authoring teams, or you had an IT department who might be helping with the, initially infrastructure management, or it wasn't. So having to speak all those languages, for lack of a better term, is really important in getting them in a room and seeing how they're all going to work together. Again, going back to Universal, it's something we've really thought a lot about, because, you have a few folks who aren't on board and start building bespoke or authoring bespoke, and, there's some significant implications of that. But Ian, maybe you can talk a little bit about stakeholder management and some of the best practices you've seen on World Travel Holdings or others, in addition to what Michael shared.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And, Michael, I think that in a lot of ways, people like yourself and like Lauren's team over at Dragon Army, when we have great partners like you, really make our job as the vendor a lot easier, because like you said, there are a lot of people that have their hands in this, all across from the developers that want to use certain tools and certain technologies to the marketers that say, it looks like this, it needs to work like this and make it happen. And we have to translate that, for the development team somehow in some way into, their hopes and dreams. And so one of the ways that we try to facilitate alongside our partners is to really outline that. The first step actually is once you're onboarding, we run what we call, at least internally, we call like a use case call. And my team comes in and we work with the partners, and then we bring in any of the other stakeholders, and we really help make sure we echo back those, because during the sales process, everybody outlines everything. But I think everybody who's probably listening here today has some sort of experience where things were said in the sales cycle and maybe things got translated one way or the other, and all of a sudden we end up somewhere else. What we really make an effort to do is to try to make sure we bridge any sort of gaps that ever may have occurred one way or the other. Who knows? These sales cycles, these days can be so long sometimes. It's understandable, but that doesn't mean that we want to have any excuse. We want to make things happen. So for our stakeholders, we focus on specifics, revalidation. That's important. You said this before. Is that actually a priority? You know what? I'm not hearing, I'm hearing developers say this, but that actually might mean that, a marketer might be left behind. Are we making sure that we're communicating that to the other business unit? The more that we can be that bridge, the better in that case.
Yeah, Ian, there's something you brought up that I think was a really great point around stakeholders, because you brought in a different group, which was your stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, the sales rep at dotCMS or the sales rep at your company, or the person who had the client engagement versus the client stakeholders, and matching those two sets of data together, what the client is saying they need and they want, what we've heard you've heard during the sales process. Those things are both going to be critical in terms of making sure that the outcomes are aligned appropriately. So maybe I'll change gears a little bit here and talk about unique considerations for dotCMS when you thought about implementing our system. Is there anything that our audience should be mindful of when it comes to a dotCMS implementation and things that you might do a little bit differently than other systems that you saw in your project? So maybe we'll start with you, Lauren, and then we'll pop over to you, Michael.
Yeah, I think this implementation, we had a lot of unique considerations because it kind of had to be a unicorn that we were searching for in a way. We needed a tool that was simple, so had a simple user interface, again, that the clients could use and maintain. And then we also needed something that was complex enough that had the capabilities that we wanted both for today, but even functionality that we haven't thought of or want to do in the future that's going to stretch the capabilities and the functionality that's on the platform. So finding something that is dynamic and flexible and usable, but simple all at the same time is a really difficult task. I think a lot of the tools that we've found can be simple, but probably has more limited design boundaries, or they can be really complex, but then only a developer really knows how to use it. So again, finding that sort of perfect mix. And then I liked, Ian, what you said about the sales cycle from that to actual implementation. You never really know what you're getting until you are deep in the tool. And we've experienced some of those gotchas with other CMSs, and this was a really, really lovely experience. We got in and it worked the way that we were told. So those are all the things we thought about during this process.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. We appreciate the feedback, and that is a big part of the vision, is having, again, balanced CMS, but also there is depth in dotCMS, and that's something that we've heard from our partners over and over again. Being in the market for 15 plus years, there's some of the details under workflows, under how content authoring works, on taxonomy, all those types of things. There's been a lot of development and resources that have gone into it. So appreciate the feedback there. Any unique considerations for you, Michael, and things that you thought about as it pertains to your project and how dotCMS helped?
Yeah, actually, I can think of 3 or 4 things that we found just amazing, and we found it pretty unique and supported our development very well. One of them is the API first design or thought behind the platform. That's amazing. That made us go super. Be super efficient on automating tasks, like creating sites automatically from the API. No need to go manually and do this like creation yourself. Also, the strong support for content reusability, like I said before. we had content spread across a bunch of sites, and in the end, when we show it, it looks like it comes on all from the same site, and in the end, that's not right. We're actually like reusing a lot of that content from a single host. The fact that it's multi-site by default and supported so well, that is great also for me, because you can separate, actually while you're designing, you can separate the different sites under their own host, and from there you can think of it as a folder, if you will, with stuff in there. That's, for me, was really good. And also the granularity of the permissions is insane. That for me was also a unique consideration for the implementation.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Ian, we're going to skip over you because you're biased on this one. So, but I appreciate the detail from both of you. I think I do want to get to another question that is often burning in everyone's mind when we talk to prospective clients. I would say 50% of the time they ask the question, should we be headless? And dotCMS can be implemented in a variety of ways: headless, traditional, hybrid. That's something we pride ourselves on. But I'm going to go to you, Michael, because you kind of showed your cards and that you are an architect developer at heart with your last answer. How did you help World Travel Holdings navigate that question?
For me, that's actually a pretty straightforward question, right? Like an if-else type of algorithm that I can apply yes to and help the customer get to the answer. For me, it is about, do I need specialized user interface management, stuff like that? Then, the dotCMS user interface might not be for you, so headless is the answer in that case. For me, it's my go-to. If you need maximum control, if you need maximum, like everything you can do on dotCMS or on a CMS, in this case dotCMS, then for me is traditional. Just go traditional, and if you need both, then do hybrid.
Yep.
You have, actually, by default, you have the best of both worlds in this product. So why not? In WDH, we actually use both heavily. We have an audience, which is the marketing team. They go into the traditional user interface CMS. They do everything they have to do. And then we have this other audience, which is pretty large as well, for which we build a custom tool that interacts via headless. So we went for the third case in this case.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Ian, how about you? You see many implementations and work with a lot of our partners. How do you typically guide customers when they say, should we be headless, hybrid, or traditional?
Yeah. It's like you said, it's the burning question these days. We're lucky at dotCMS that we can say, pick one of three, or all. And so the brilliant thing is, I guess really the key thing is, who am I talking to? What is the makeup of the teams? I think, Michael, you're totally right in terms of like a usability standpoint. That's critical. A lot of folks don't necessarily have the flexibility of having like a partner that maybe can conduct things in any kind of way, right? They have to play to their strengths in a lot of ways. So for me, when I'm advising, how are we taking this implementation? I look at, if you're doing headless, that could be great, but what is the makeup of your team? What's the makeup of your partner's team? Are they really going to be able to support that? Because that is going to be a little bit more custom, more development heavy. There's going to be an app that, we at dotCMS, we're not going to be able to support that the same way that we would support a native implementation. So you need to make sure that your team is really going to be there and be able to translate that. Because we can certainly support the app, but we're not maintaining that in dotCMS. So that's the most critical piece that I look at first. And if somebody says, I want headless, but I don't have any developers and I don't want to spend more money on these Angular developers maybe, but I want an Angular app, I say, well, let's pump the brakes here and really talk about why. Are you just going headless because it seems trendy and somebody put it in your head, or is there really a reason? And we dig into that. I think the most beautiful thing though, you're not locked in over here at dotCMS. So people decide they want to launch one site here, and then for the next site that they decide to go through, or another group that comes in, they want to take it a different direction, you can do everything on the same instance of dotCMS, the same server, and you have that flexibility. So having that, options and that true introspection of what you really can support, what your development team can support, what your marketers needs, that's where I focus.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. We'll keep moving along because that's probably a topic we could spend a long time on. We have finite time here. I guess maybe I'll open it to you, Ian, and just the idea of a successful project and the milestones. You've had a view to some of the projects we've talked about today, but what's the commonality in terms of the milestones and how you're reading out the milestones for a successful implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Lauren and Michael already touched on this a bit earlier, but the first step is, what are we really working with? And laying that groundwork. Do we have these strong defined requirements? Because, especially when you're talking about a platform like dotCMS, we are incredibly flexible, which means, most things that you're trying to do, we can accomplish. And that's why people come to us, especially with complicated use cases, is that we can look at this and solve their problems. But there might be 5 or 6 different ways to solve the problem. So getting that through requirements out, not just in terms of, purely functional requirements, but also based on the user experience of how you're achieving those and maintaining those requirements from the get-go, that's absolutely critical. And so, that's the first milestone, getting those use cases from a technical and functional perspective, but also an end user perspective outlined and hammered out. Absolutely critical. There's a lot of details we could go in, but like you said, we have, limited time. The 3 other milestones that I look at in terms of a .cms landscape, since we are a structured content CMS, we look at a content architecture. How are you creating reusable content models that is speaking true to your design principles and staying and is easily repeatable, reusable? You have the Great Clips franchise sites, you have the World Travel Holdings agent sites and their other D2C sites. How are you able to reuse these structures for quick launches of new properties and maintaining a consistent brand voice while still having the customizability? That is the groundwork of everything in dotCMS. So that's an absolutely critical milestone. From there, it's a little bit more of the fun stuff, the bells and whistles. We call it the functional implementation milestone of how are we bringing things to life? How are we getting interaction points and call to actions? What other systems might we be integrating into the architecture in order to really, have the magic happen, so to speak. And, a lot of the code that comes along with that. Once we have that together, it's all about either migrating content or creating the next net new content for complete greenfield sites, and then looking at all the fun go live pieces. That is making sure we have all of our DNS entries, all of our certs, the CDN and is caching everything appropriately, everything that's a downstream from the actual application. That's nonetheless incredibly important. We make sure that we bring in our team from our awesome cloud engineers that work hand in hand with our partners and our clients to make sure that that last piece is just a couple of check boxes and we get there. That's sort of the 20,000 foot view. And if you follow that down, you make sure you don't miss any of the details in there, you end up moving pretty.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate the detailed answer on there. And I think, going back to starting with the requirements, the functional requirements and how they impact everyone is the basis for a good implementation. And I think you eloquently outlined the subsequent steps once those are done. So I do want to not make this all like roses and success. I want to make sure that often folks learn from the challenges that they face along the way. So maybe, Lauren, I can kick it to you. Just, what were some of the big hurdles that you had in the process, and how did you overcome some of them?
Yeah, I think you mentioned or alluded to this just in terms of the workflows, that dotCMS is different workflows than a lot of the other CMSs. So when we launched the franchisee site, typically how we've worked with other CMSs, the production environment prod is the go-to source of truth as it relates to content. So that's how we started working on this one, where clients would make changes to the content and we would work in the lower dev environments for code pushes. When we pushed that up to prod, everything got out of sync and we couldn't figure out why. So we got there. It took us a second. I think we finally had a call with your team of going, we troubleshot. We just can't figure this out. Help us. And once we found out what was the cause, we revised our workflow and the client's workflow to accommodate it. And now it's working great. But definitely took us a second to get there and was an unexpected thing, especially post-launch.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Lauren. There's some of the nuances there in terms of how code and content gets pushed and some of the best practices. So that's a great one. And sounds like you had good collaboration with the dotCMS team. Anything on your side, Michael, in terms of big challenges that you faced along the way and how you overcame them?
I would kind of like classify them in non-technical and technical. The non-technical ones I don't have a lot to say. They're pretty great to work with at the team. And I shouldn't say, otherwise, because they might be seeing this. But, from the non-technical point of view, getting the right way to capture those requirements, like getting the right techniques in place and facilitating that to happen was key for us. It was challenging. It wasn't the easiest task. And then from the technical point of view, being able to reuse content from a common host in an environment like this one, in which pages are not rendered. I mean, dotCMS. DNS doesn't directly point to a dotCMS instance, but instead it goes through a WAF and some other networking layers, and then retrieves the data. That was a challenge for which we actually had to create a plugin, as Ian is very familiar with, to be able to intercept every call and then grab content from different places to be able to conform the actual page to display. That was a challenge because we hadn't done it in the past, but at the same time, it was pretty easy to implement once we had the right help. And Ian is a very big part of it. And the other challenge that we had that I can think of is creating 6,000 sites. The scale of this use case is just massive. And doing that via the API, it poses challenges. And we get some feedback to the team through Ian, and I'm pretty sure they will be improving some of the things. It's an evolution; nothing's perfect. And but for us, like subdividing the problem into smaller problems, like in different steps. Like copying an existing site, then performing some changes on that site. And before that, we actually had a health check functionality to make sure that I was ready for the third step. So between step 1 and 3, for the health check, all of that was a nice engineering problem, and that's a product like it. And it was a challenge, and it also got to a good result, good resolution.
Yeah, thank you for that,
Happy
Michael.
story.
Yeah, no, it looks like you're smiling, so I'm gonna pass it to you to see if there was anything you want to add on to what Michael was saying, or just sort of where you typically see folks get held up, right? Or they run into some roadblocks when it comes to implementations.
Yeah. And obviously I relate very closely to whatever Lauren is saying or Michael's saying. I probably was very hands-on, with both of them. And so, there's always layers and layers. We understand web development is complicated. No matter what you're using, no matter what tool to translate something into your requirements can be hard. And, sort of to touch on like Michael's point, in the plugin, right? There is no CMS out there that is a true, there's no silver bullet in web development, right? Yeah, we all have to figure out how can we find a platform that's going to meet most of our needs, and then find a way to we're either going to chuck stuff out, or we're going to make compromises, or we're going to be able to extend. And I think one of the amazing things about dotCMS, and I've worked in content management about over 10 years now, for a few different providers. And dotCMS has this ability to be so extensible, and so if there is something that is custom that needs to do, and you have the will, you have like a great development team, like Michael has over there that has the will to implement something custom on top of dotCMS. That can be done. That's common. That's maintainable. So being able to take that next level and say, we don't have to compromise. This is an important business requirement. We don't know if anybody else can really do this out of the box. And even if they could, we don't want to sacrifice everything else that dotCMS would give us. So not having to compromise and being able to extend is really great.
Yeah.
Sometimes things are a little bit more difficult though, and there are decisions that have to be made. It's just about weighing the pros and cons. And I think the great privilege that I have is communicating directly with customers and then being able to come back to my product team and say, look, we have some needs here. Let me be a voice of a customer here. And, let's talk about our roadmap. We have things that are important, but I see this applying not just for this implementation, but for a lot of other things. And, sometimes we can then translate that into quick wins, a couple of quick enhancements that can get things down. And sometimes it just gets onto our roadmap for a future look. And we get to stay that much closer. So I think our product managers, sometimes they love me, sometimes they hate me for that. But at the end of the day, we all are focused on how we can, look at the future of the customer and say, well, how can we make sure that we keep things where they need to be now, but then know that as we grow, it's just going to get better.
Yeah, Ian, thank you for that, because I think a big part of overcoming the hurdles is the connectivity between the teams, the partner, the customer, and dotCMS. And so we are nimble enough that we work in I think a really efficient fashion. And I think if folks haven't had a chance to engage and watch Preston's roadmap session around where we're going and how quickly it's evolving, I would encourage folks to do that, because it's always a mess when there's people involved. But as we continue to evolve our product, hopefully some of the hurdles that folks have had to date will get overcome. We are almost at time. Can't believe it. It's been a fun session with all of you. Before we go, I'm going to put you on the hot seat a little bit and ask for a dose of humility as you answer the question, which is, what learnings did you take from your recent project, and what would you do different moving forward? There's always room for growth and improvement. So I'm gonna go to Lauren first, and then we'll go to Michael.
Thank you, Ryan, for that one. I think the theme of today, we've talked a lot about flexibility, and I think the flexibility would have been a learning that we would do in our next project. So when we started out with the franchisee site, we built components and content types for that site. And then while there were some that we could reuse, we effectively walled that off and then built the main site. I think we found out that the way dotCMS works is there is a lot more cross-pollination possible. So we have now gone back and redone that and made that more effective moving forward. But had we known that from the start, I think it just would have been a layer of efficiency that we would have built in. But yeah, that was a nice learning that we're going to take on and use for other projects.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you. We're grateful to have you guys as partners, especially for the mindset. How about you, Michael?
I would say two things, and one of them I think is along the lines of what Lauren was saying. Getting to a better taxonomy, getting to a better set of content types and the relationships early on would definitely cut off development time. That's a learning for us. I mean, how compatible is that with the agility that we follow? That's it's hard to assess, but we can definitely do it better next time. And the second thing is that not all of the developers had the knowledge and the right certifications. We were discovering things along the way sometimes for them, and I would enforce it for the next time for everybody in the team that I staff to have the right skill set and be a dotCMS certified, whether it is content creator or developer, whatever it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
And
Thank you, Lauren.
Ryan, I actually, just want to jump in there because that's something that is top of mind for me as well when we bring people on, whether it's new partners that have new resources that are working on dotCMS or just clients in general. And one thing that hopefully you'll be all seeing really soon is that we have an amazing course development team over here. We have an LMS that, is rolling out, and people are coming in to be able to actually get these certifications, both, from a partner side, but also just from like a web developer, a content editor, making that learning a little bit more interactive. Because, we could say all we want. Yeah, we feel confident, but everybody feels a little bit better if it can be a little bit, more metrics. Give us more metrics. That's sort of the theme in this day and age, right? We want to see that quantitative data. And so we're working right now at dotCMS and, to really make sure we can support that and give people that confidence up front.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ian. And you can reach out to your account manager, your partner lead, anyone you've worked with within the customer experience team to learn more about those certifications. We're actually at time, so I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to Lauren, to Michael, to Ian for joining, for our listeners and audience for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your time at dotConnect, and we will talk to you all soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for day one of dotConnect24. We hope you enjoyed the content and got to know dotCMS just a little bit better. We're excited to see you tomorrow for day 2 of dotConnect24 with 10 sessions and over 15 speakers and plenty of opportunity to learn, network, and connect. We're excited to see you tomorrow.